Welcome to another exciting episode of Boston Devops Bill. We're joined by the supervisor today. Looks like she wants me to, do something more productive than talk into a microphone, look into a camera, and tell you about the provisioning system that we're building today. So on the screen, we have our architecture of our provisioning system. And basically, our provisioning script is going to consume our VM node description, and that's how it's going to know what nodes to build. And it's going to go ahead and create a node, and then run our two provisioning scripts, our node provision script and our disk provision script. And let's talk about this piece right here, because that's what this particular episode is focused on, which is the JSON side of things. So what we have is JSON is a way to describe named value pairs in which we can easily parse and include them into the fields which we created for our Vagrant file. So name value pairs, an example of that is right down here, okay? We'll have a name which we'll associate a value with. And the names are actually represented by strings, and the strings are encased by double quotes. Our values can be strings, numbers, objects, arrays, true, false, Boolean values, and null. Are we happy down there? Okay, all right. So what we have is, when we talk about strings, strings is a value, and it's enclosed in double quotes. Numbers are not quoted. Objects are encased, consists of name value pairs encased in curly braces. Arrays can simply enclose the values which we're talking about here in brackets. And of course, we have true and false, which are Boolean values, and they are literal values. So we don't need to enclose them in quotes. We just need to type out the word true and the word false, and JSON will convert that into a Boolean value. So, and we have null, which is the empty string. Now, I talked a little bit about arrays just a second ago, and I wanted you to know that, arrays are just ordered collections of values. And the values on the screen, as you can see, are right here, which we just covered. And an example of that is, we're going to still have a named value, which is a quoted string. We're going to separate that named value by a colon. Then we're going to open a square bracket, and inside of that square bracket we can have any of these types of values. We can even have an array in an array, okay? So what we have is, we have strings in this example. We have the value 1, 2, 3. We have true, and these are all values stored in an array. And you would access those values using the named simple, followed by a square bracket and a number 0 through, in this case, 2. So this would be element 0, this would be element 1, this would be element 2. Objects are very similar to arrays in that they group values together. But what objects group is actually name value pairs. So what this allows us to do is to group or create a collection of name value pairs that are used to describe this object. So in the example, my object, okay, we have field 1 with a value of 1, 2, 3 separated by a comma, field 2, the colon in the string, okay, and with name value pairs, again, I think I didn't say this, but the actual name portion of this pair is to the left of the colon, and the value is always to the right. And we'll always separate these name value pairs with a comma, even if they're in object. Okay, so that's really the long and short of it. What we're going to do right now is we're going to go pound some keys. We're going to see how this works, okay? And we'll have some fun. Okay, we're back to pound some keys here. And what we're going to do is we're going to define this wonderful JSON file. And the JSON file is going to describe our nodes. So let's jump in. Let's begin. I'm going to create a new file. Let me see. Let me actually do this. Okay. Jump on the other screen. Okay. Now I'm doing a split screen. So basically what we can do is we can look at the Vagrant file and be able to pull out the values which we need from the Vagrant file and put them inside of this JSON file which we're going to create. Now, unfortunately, with the JSON file, we can't put comments in there. So it's rather annoying. I probably should write a preprocessor or something to process through and extract all the comments, but it is what it is. So what we're going to do is we're just going to jump in, start defining. We're going to begin with just defining a simple object, okay? And this object is going to describe our node, okay? So I'm going to call our each machine that we create a node. And we're going to use the name value paired, so it's node, not name. And to the right of this, I'm just going to call it build prod as our first node or first machine that we're going to describe. Now, I'm going to separate each one of these name pairs with a comma, okay, which is standard JSON. So we're going to have a box, and the box is going to be a sent OS/7 box, and we're going to have a shared a shared network location. And what this shared value is, it's going to be our way in which we export system from our local directory location from our local host to our virtual box, okay? So basically what I'm describing is a shared location, okay? So inside of our shared location, it's going to be an array because we need a couple of values which we're going to create. So if we have 5 of these shared locations which we want to, export from our local PC to our virtual machine, we would have 5 different objects. So let's describe an object in here, which is one of the things which we learned just shortly, that we can have an array of objects. So our objects here are going to be, let me see, host And let's say that I'm going to say dir share. Okay. So the name of the share is going to be dir share. Okay. And on our guest, we're going to put this in image/shared. Okay, so what we have is we just described the, don't point to the screen, move your mouse. So we just described our share as having a host location, which is, a host location and a guest location. Okay, so inside of our host, we'll create a directory called dir share. Inside of our guest, we'll mount that dir share on img shared. And because this is the end of the value of this named value pair, we're going to put a comma. Okay, and we're going to keep it moving. All right, so now let's go ahead and describe our memory. And this is going to be 2048. So we're going to allocate 2 gigabytes worth of memory. Now, on some machines, that might be a little much, and, because we're only talking about most of the machines having 4 gigabytes of memory, so I'm taking half of your memory, half of my memory. And what hopefully doesn't happen is that we run out of memory space and we start crashing as we, do more and more things inside of our virtual node. Okay, so we're going to need an IP address, and my IP address, which I'm going to use, is I'm going to use a NATed address, which is 162.168. I'm just going to pull an arbitrary subnet of 32, and I'm going to assign it with an address of 10, okay? And for ports, because we want to open ports so that we have a mechanism in which we can communicate back and forth with our machines, it's going to be another array. And inside this array, we're going to create another object. And most of the times which we're creating objects is because we want to associate a single name with multiple values, okay? So when we look over at our host file, we have our host name, which is, I'm actually changing it to build prod. We have our CentOS. We don't have the facility just yet for, to create shares inside of VirtualBox, but that's something which I'm going to add, and I included it here because I know we're going to need this, okay? Now, we also have memory, okay, which, as you can see down here, let me do this. How's that? Okay. And we'll slide this over just a little bit. We'll assign this value here to our, IP address. We'll have our memory down here, which is 2048, which we'll use to modify the VirtualBox, and of course we're going to use our host name again. But do you see how many times we used that host name? We used it 3 times here in order to describe our initial box, where here we're going to describe it once and we'll assign it 3 times. So that, that will cut down any mistakes we make or anything else like that. Describing the ports, we're going to have a host. Surprising how that works. A host address, rather, of 9,000. And we're going to have a guest port of 80. Yeah, 80. And we're going to have a protocol of HTTP. Okay. So that gives us the ability to have multiple ports if we want to have multiple connections back to our uh, host machine. And my host machine is an IBM PC, and my guest machine is going to be the CentOS. Okay. And that's the same with you. So basically, what we have is we just described our node. But we want to describe more than just one node because, we're going to have different machines for different functions. Okay. For instance, we'll have a build machine, we'll have a test machine, things of that nature. So, one of the things which we're going to have to go into is we're going to have to talk about this whole naming convention, which I have here. And the naming convention is very, very important because what we want is we want to use Puppet to derive this build name so that if we have 1,000 environments, we can just say, hey, well, this is environment, and if it's targeted towards the production, return the production key, okay, and be able to put the two facts together to come out with a host name. And one of the things which we have when we start developing these environments is that there's no two environments which are the same that I've been into. And I've been into environments from Boeing, Lockheed, Wells Fargo, various government, institutions like IRS, the FEMA website, what else was it? The Medicare website. So, I mean, I've been in a ton of different environments, and that's not even talking about the places where I was an actual employee at, okay? So, every one of these environments are so different, okay? Which is why we can't really just go to another environment or rely on what we did in the past, take something from the past, bring it in, and just plop it into our environment and say it's going to work the same because the context of those utilities are not the same. And more importantly, the context of what the business requirements are definitely not the same. The people you're working with, they're not the same, okay? So they don't have the same agenda. So what we wind up doing is let's abstract what we did over here that worked in another company, and let's abstract that idea. Let's take the idea, not necessarily the exact implementation. Let's take the idea of what it accomplished, what was produced by it, and let's apply it here. And that's sort of what we're doing by abstracting this virtual machine description into a JSON file, okay? So we're abstracting the idea that we want a machine to do X, but we don't care what X is. We care about this machine and what goes into the machine. So we're abstracting that. We're taking that functionality and we're describing it, the name, the type of box, how it's shared, what the memory is, what the IP address is, what the ports are, okay? Because these are constant things which we will need if we define one box or 1,000 boxes. And the only difference is really the name and the IP address. So with these two things, we make this box unique. And we make it unique by targeting to an environment. Now, will there be additional modifications which we're going to use to make this box fit into the environment we plan to? Yes. Okay. And for that, we're going to add scripts. But we're not going to do that just yet. We're going to actually set up our JSON file to handle that. And one of the things that this JSON file is doing right now, And let me go ahead and save this. That way I can jump into the Sublime I guess you can say format for JSON. Okay, and I'm just going to call my JSON file vm_machine.json. Okay, so now here it actually is, and it's being recognized as JSON. And actually, it just caught my first error. Look at that. That's horrible. I forgot to quote HTTP. Okay, so let me put some quotes around that. Bingo. Perfect. That's why, this editor, Sublime, has the ability to handle different file formats. And using a editor that can do that helps us along the way. Unfortunately, okay, and here's a big thing. A lot of times, I'm doing a lot of desktop support. I go to one place, another place, different people. And a lot of times when I go to different companies, I don't always have the luxury of using a standard editor. So don't just learn one editor, learn a bunch of them, because you never know when you're inside of a place that, the best editor you have is Notepad or VI, and VI is extremely powerful. So learn all the ins and outs of VI, learn all the ins and outs of Sublime. This actually, I just bought this, so it'll be kind of, I'm kind of learning all the ins and outs of it, and it's, pretty decent, pretty powerful editor. So anyway, getting back to this, what we just described was a single node. Okay, and we put it inside of a JSON object. And the reason why we put it inside of a JSON object was so that we can access the individual fields of this object. Okay, but we just don't want one VM machine. We want the ability, if we want just one machine, that's fine. We can define just one machine. But we want the ability to describe multiple machines. And this is what, this is the real reason why I chose to describe this machine inside of JSON, okay? Or to use JSON to describe it. So let's come in here, and what I'm going to do is I'm going to create a named value called machines. Or better yet, why don't I just call it VM machines? And I like lowercase because, oh Lord, I'm a horrible typer. So I'm going to create an array, okay? And to create an array, I'm just going to open a brace here. And I'm going to close this brace down here. And this created our array. But so I can have as many nodes as I want inside of here. I'm just going to access them from the name tag of VM machines. So I can say VM machines and sub-0, which is our first machine, because arrays, just like most programming languages, begin from the number 0 up to n-1, okay? So if we have virtual machines, our first one is going to be 0. So that's going to be, if I want to access the name of the node, I can just say node. And that's the same if I want VM. Let's say I want ports. So this is machine. See, I told you my typing is horrible. 0 dot ports. Now, this too is an array. So we'll put a 0 there. And then we'll describe that, using its named key of host. And that's how we access the value of host. So whether it's a simple field, which we're looking at, or whether or not it's an array of fields, we can still access it very simply. And this allows us to abstract the functionality or the parameters of this machine nicely. Okay, so I'm going to take this away because unfortunately we can't have comments inside of this JSON implementation. But we also want to not forget that when we talk about a JSON file, we're talking about objects. So everything inside that JSON file is an object. So even if we just had simple nodes, which remember we just had this defined, our named value pairs were inside of an object. And remember, objects are described with curly braces. So we can come down here and we're going to end that, which creates our object. Okay, and I'm just going to tab this over so we get proper, there we go, that looks good. So that we get proper indentation. Indentation is it's helpful, okay? You can do it without, but, I find that, by using tabs to describe a hierarchy of information, it's easier for me to read, okay? So that's what we have. We have our first machine defined, okay? If we wanted to have another machine, let's call it the test environment, we'd simply copy what we currently have here. Oh, wait a second, are we missing a quote? No, I am stopping a little bit early. Okay, so let me come down here. And this describes the whole machine. Okay, so I'm just going to copy it. I'm going to place a comma and then paste it in. And to make this a unique machine, I'm going to change the IP and I'm going to call this test. So this is test within the prod environment. Maybe it's used as a smoke test prior to deployment. So the long and short of it is that each one of these machines are described in an array. Okay, we access the array, the VM machine array, and when we do, we index it, 0, 1, 2, 3, and we can access the entire node here. Okay, and when we access these named value pairs, we're going to wind up assigning these pairs over here to the various locations, okay? And we can have 1 or 1,000 machines inside of here as long as we address them properly. So that's our big JSON file, okay? And I'm going to stop here. I know I'm teasing you, I mean, I got you all into this JSON. You were like, oh, yeah, okay, let's go use it. But you know what? I'm running out of time, and I got to keep these, nice and small and distinct so that, you don't get too bored or too overwhelmed because life happens around us, right? So, this is a small installment, and we're going to do our next installment in probably the next couple of days, okay? And I realize this went a little bit long because I, first had to teach you a little bit about JSON, and then we had to create the file, okay? So, but if you're a champ with JSON, go ahead, fill in the rest, and we should, be able to have a lot of fun in our next session here, okay? So thank you very much for showing up, and thank you very much for watching again. Don't forget, subscribe to my channel, please, okay? I really appreciate the support, appreciate all the love you can give me on this one. So I hope to see you in the next episode. Take care.